Yay, we're live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's 911 Wonder Woman's Empower panel session. This session today is when suicide happens at work, just honoring, healing, and holding space for that. If you guys have a couple questions, like what are those giant googly eyes behind me? Those are my earthquake detectors. So if they're shaking, there's an earthquake. So be alarmed. For me, not for you, because you're not here. And then also those boxes that's like a bunch of my kits that from the Zero Suicide kits that we make. So if you guys wanted to catch the earlier today, we had a whole workshop with 911 about suicide awareness and prevention. So it's really cool. I mean, that's what this month is all about, and different things bringing together. So just a few things I wanted to speak about. So 911 Wonder Woman as a nonprofit, our mission is to bring professionals together, not only to support and empower 911 individuals in the important work that we do, but as important individuals we are as people, and invest in ourselves as much as we do in that stuff as well. And that's what this space is. It's for connection, growth, encouragement, because you guys matter, and all that stuff. Just as much as your work does, like, and all that stuff. Before we begin, just a gentle content warning. This panel, we will be discussing topics that can be difficult or triggering for some. So please take care of yourself. Please step away and rejoin as you need. This is recorded, so your well being comes first, okay? Other housekeeping, we ask that all comments, conversations remain respectful and safe for everyone. We have many people here today from family, friends, coworkers, peers, and just visitors from other centers who are dealing with this in different elements of their own life. Every voice deserves to be honored and safe in this space. And then last, I want to recognize all the panelists. You guys have all worked so hard up to this moment to prepare and share everything that you have with everyone. I just want to say I'm proud of you guys. And so even if one person leaves feeling seen, supported, and helped, every bit of your effort has helped champion that. So I'll kick it off to you, Paula, to kind of introduce more to the story.
Great. I'm Paula Kiger. I was a friend of Kim Little's, and I want to share a little bit to introduce her story. Most of our discussion here today will be centered on the days surrounding Kim's death by suicide in 2021. Before that discussion, though, I want to share that Kim had an incredibly successful life, full of family and friends who loved her beyond measure, and she felt the same about them. Even though we are focusing on a specific part of her story, I want to honor the whole incredible person she was. She really was a Wonder Woman. When she died, Kim had just earned her MW and left the dispatcher job she had held at the Florida State University Police Department for years. The circumstances leading up to her death took place on campus. So that meant that several colleagues had to handle all of the administrative and operational processes, while everyone who had worked with her had to simultaneously deal with an immediate and gutting grief. One thing Lieutenant McSwain, who you're going to meet shortly, said in his eulogy was that Kim was a protector, and truer words have never been spoken. It's my hope that someone participating today will learn something to help them protect their own mental health and the mental well-being of their teams. It's exactly what Kim would have wanted, and we're all so grateful that you're here today.
Okay. So right now, if there's other panelists that would like to just join to add to Paula's story from of who Kim was, anything else that you want to add about that?
If I can you hear me okay? Okay. Um, yes, I totally agree. Kim was all of those things and then some. The morning after it happened, when I was sitting with her mom, she made a comment, and I just kind of said back to her that she was anything but little. Kim did everything and did it a million times bigger than what you would think. Always went above the bar that you set. But Kim was a great friend, a great teacher. She was, so I worked with Kim. She was my trainer. She was the one who taught me how to do everything that I do still now. And every time that there's something that goes on my work, I kind of giggle to myself, and I'm just like, huh, did you see that, Kim? You know, you saw it because you taught me how to do that. So, but she was everything that you could have ever wanted in a person, a friend. Um, and again, she was everything but little. So she was a great person.
I really like that. If I think that captures her well. So I want to ask you guys how you guys were able to navigate some of your grief and support one another through this experience, and and obviously how that's led into some other things such as intention creating, how that changed your workplace for others.
Okay, I think I'll start off. If can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, let's ride. Um, I'll start off. I am for those that are viewing Lieutenant Greg McSwain. At the time of this incident, I was the commander over our department's investigations division. Um, my relationship with Kim, it started back when she was a security guard here on campus, and so I spent several years on night shift. So I had an opportunity to work with her as a security guard. I worked with her as a dispatcher, and she spent several years on our shift. And so, obviously, through the experiences of police officer and dispatch, we built a friendship that extended beyond being on duty. Kim got to a place, or we got to a place where we cared about the person and not just the job's position. Um, on this particular day, initially we didn't know who we were responding to, so it was another call for service. And I think once we arrived and got the information or confirmed who we were dealing with, I don't think the job changed, or if it did change, it changed for the better, meaning we did what Kim would do in going above and beyond. At that particular time, we were working, we were police officers, we were dispatch, we were doing those things that we were required to do. The grief portion of it came later. And I think that's something that we'll end up talking about here today. The grief portion came later when we turned off the robot and went back into our humans, our flesh, our skin. And so it was easy to work through it because that's what we have been trained to do. That's what we have been molded to do. You go into these situations, you put yourself to the side, and you deal with what's been presented. And that was one of the walls that we ran into later on, is trying to get beyond putting yourself to the side and getting people to face their reality, and talk through a lot of the things that they had witnessed, that they had seen with their own eyes, or that they had heard about, and accepted the reality that a close friend had been taken away from us.
Yeah, and let's go through. So, and do you kind of introduce each other, like, and what your relation and connection was with? I think that kind of helps speak to that story of like how this impacted.
I'll go next, if that's okay. My name is Heather Costabero. At the time that I met Kim, I was brand new officer on midnights. She was the dispatcher. And we not only created like a really good professional working relationship, but a friendship as well. I always found her to be on top of her game when it came to dispatch. I knew when she was working, we were safe, and we were going to be provided a lot of information. She, like Emily, helped me learn a bunch of things about not only her job, but my job as well. And then when I transitioned to days, we still kept in contact, and I knew she was going to school at FSU and wanted to further her career in the mental health. Um, but yeah, the date that we found out the news, like, not only do you have a job to do and perform your normal duties, but the aftermath of this isn't this is so close, like we couldn't file this one away. And then I think just all of your own emotions and like the anger and like sorting through that, we were able to rely on a close group. Like Greg and I talked all the time. We wanted to make sure Emily was good and everyone else who was on that scene or impacted by this, especially her family. It's still such a blur and like such a triggering moment, but here she is still teaching us how to be better for one another. One of the questions in the chat, did you know she was struggling? I think all of us had our own conversations and connections with Kim, and I don't think personally I knew the severity of what she was going through. While it's my job to evaluate and talk to friends and stuff like that, I think sometimes we know too much and we know how to close that conversation and that wall off. So, it's like you might know some things, but you might only know that tip of the iceberg and not everything else underneath. So sometimes it was hard to say, did I miss something? I think we will all live with that kind of question of like, was there something that was missed? Um, but at the end of the day, we were just doing and performing the best that we could.
If I can piggyback off of that, my name's Emily. She was my trainer at FSU, and then she became my shift partner and really good friend outside of work. Um, the how did we miss that she was struggling? I think that is something that if regardless if we're talking about Kim or just somebody in general, if they're not going to want that to be that outside mask that they're wearing, they're not going to let you know. So one thing through my grief process that I still struggle with it to this day. Monday night, I was driving into work, and we had a 45-minute long conversation that was very normal for us. About twice a week, we would call each other. She would be getting off of work, and I'd be going into work, and we would just catch up, have a general conversation, just kind of girly chat it up. And we were that night in particular mostly talking about some of the things that I was struggling with, and had shared some accomplishments with her, and then she had also shared some of those things. So and it was all very positive. It was all with the intent of having further plans in life, and then come to find out that night, that Tuesday morning, she had also tried to take her own life by I think overdosing in some medicine. And then so it's you can the question of did we miss anything? Did anybody miss anything? I think that is a question that can be asked for anybody's scenario. It's a mask that people hold, and if it's not something that's wanting to be shared, it might be they just don't want to share that, or they just don't feel as if they're in a safe place with a safe person to be able to share that. Or commonly it's the that I don't want the justice, that I don't want the pushback on what I'm about to share with you, and I don't feel I feel negatively, I feel this way about myself or my views on the world. And it's just having the fear of getting that pushback sometimes is in that person's mind at that time. It's not upfront about saying, coming to a person, and saying, I need you just to listen to me just for a second, because I am not well, and I am not expecting you to make me well, but I just need to get this off of my chest. And that's not anything that I think that Kim was all that good about. Having to talk to her about her emotions was like pulling teeth. So I was stuck in the room with her for 12 hours for multiple times in a day. So it was there's just no way of knowing. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. So
And I'll go next since I think I'm last but not least here. So my name is Sarah Lull. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm also the director of the Victim Advocate Program here at Florida State. And I am the only one here who did not know Kim personally. So my involvement with this came about, unfortunately, after she died. Well, the day that she jumped, I was immediately called to the hospital as part of my role as a victim advocate to be there and provide support for the family. I immediately saw how much support the family had, how much, our officers were doing a great job of being there for her family because it was somebody that everyone knew personally and mattered a lot to our officers. And so I think a big part of where this ended up going for me personally was trying to check in with our FSCPD because I knew then and I know now that they were doing what they needed to do to get through situations and power through without maybe necessarily stopping to figure out just exactly how this is impacting them individually. And so for me, I think that the larger part of the conversation that's just so invaluable for anyone who is a first responder, 911, anyone in those different areas is how are we promoting health and wellness and mental health care in the workplace? And how are we having that conversation? Because I think everyone has spoken to, like, how did we not know with Kim? I think one of the interesting things I learned about with Kim after the fact from talking with her family and talking with the people who knew her well and loved her so much was that she really portrayed what she wanted to portray to the world. She had just graduated with her master's in social work. So she actually had a mental health degree herself. She ran marathons. She took care of herself. I mean, there were so many things that Kim did that would, for an outsider, would think, oh, she doesn't fit the profile per se of somebody who would be so depressed. And I think that just goes to show you that depression and suicide can come in any shape or form, and it can look a variety of different ways. And I think that when we talk about intervention, I think the most important part is what kind of support are we providing in our spaces so that people who don't love to talk about emotions, like Emily said, and I think we can maybe stereotype that across a lot of law enforcement, fire, whatever, right? Like a lot of us don't love to talk about emotions. How do we create spaces where we are providing that level of support? And so that was my involvement with this. And I think I'm just so thankful that Lieutenant McSwain had asked for me to join today because I'm happy and thrilled to be part of kind of the ongoing conversation for how do we provide support in these spaces so that more things like this don't happen.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So with warning signs, like I think people are very in tune to like the obvious, warning signs. You kind of spoke to like was she, she was taking care of herself. She had goals. That's kind of something that like is interesting to me. And so how can we do you guys have any advice for everyone else? How can we recognize warning signs when someone is masking like that? Is there anything that you picked up that might help now, having like seeing where you are now, that may help in the future?
Now, that's a good question, Don. I'll tell you the one thing that I learned from the standpoint of being a supervisor in general and supervising several of the officers involved in this incident and several incidents afterwards, even with me being an authority figure, I learned the importance of creating a safe place. We have, we have policies and procedures that we go by, but based on that's going back to the relationship with Kim, there comes a time when you take officer off your name and I become Greg. I become, big brother or little, you're a little sister now. And I think in creating those safe places or the safe spaces, it tears down that wall of if I am open, what happens next? it gets rid of those concerns of, if I'm open about how I feel, from the police officer standpoint, are they going to allow me to carry my gun? If I tell them how I feel, are they going to remove me from the workplace? And so it's a matter sometimes of having conversation and closing your mouth and opening your ears and listening, not necessarily fixing, but listening and allowing that person to, as we said with the hashtag, pour out a little for Kim. Allow you to pour it out, allow you to talk about it, allow you to cry it out. And then we come together as a team and build some sort of journey that goes toward resolution. So, not an authority figure, but I care about you as the person. And that's been my approach from the incident with Kim, and even moving forward, years later. That's my approach. If I see something and you are not acting like the person that I know you are, we can have a conversation, and that conversation can, quote unquote, be off record, because I care about you, the person, and not you, the officer, or you, the dispatcher.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So, embracing, because you kind of, I really like what you said, where it's like, if I'm open, what happens next? Because we talk about like I've heard the word like, hey, let's be vulnerable with each other as friends, but lending that into the workplace, and I think what you're capturing, kind of like, because I've seen it, where people are like, nothing's off the record when you're a boss, and that makes it really hard. So how do you battle those challenges when like maybe people are hearing these things? Because I agree with you, like there's just Greg, you know what I mean? Like, and there's that, like, in the end of the day, like our titles, that's not what defines us and who we are. So how could you help an agency or people who are battling that, embracing that vulnerability, changing some of that dialogue in the workplace, and shifting to more of that open concept where you can have that free space?
Okay, one of the great things, and even in this setting here, one thing that we talk about quite a bit here at FSU is, big word, partnership. And so there are certain policies that we have as, at the police department, that that govern how we do things. But the good thing about being here is there are several resources that are available, and so I'm grateful for our team, and Sarah and her team. And so it's about coming together and, again, having conversation. And we're realistic from the standpoint of, confidentiality goes so far. So if you tell me, hey, I've got a bomb in my car, then I can no longer keep a secret. I've got to go find the bomb. But if you're telling me that, hey, I'm not sleeping and my boyfriend didn't do this and I'm struggling with, work, or, moving forward in the training program, then that's worthy of conversation. And everything doesn't mean that I have to put it on a Word document and send it up. And sometimes we have to listen. And in listening, we learn more than we are looking for. Sometimes, if we listen long enough, there might be something that this person says that they can help themselves, but not being so closed-minded that we say, okay, the only way that we can fix this is if we operate under the purview of FSU Police Department, not when you have a victim advocate, unit that's there and available, who has access to resources that might go beyond what the police department can do. Sometimes I'm not the fixer. Sometimes I'm the transfer to the appropriate service. And so we have to be humble enough and not try to fix everything, but identify the sources available that will provide, the necessary resources for that person that we're talking to.
Thank you. So, with that, how do you guys do? How since then has it shifted your guys' check-ins, like with peers, law enforcement? Maybe Heather, like in your role, like, and both Sarah with yours, like how did that shift things, or did you change anything, or is there stuff that you just did more of, with check-ins with peers, and fellow law enforcement? How did that work?
Yeah, I feel like it did change a lot. I think it goes from like the casual check-in of like what's going on to being extremely intentional. And just like Greg shared, you have to give a little to get a little. And sometimes that takes, with our industry, a little bit longer. You have to be patient with people. And we have to see the genuine intention and authenticity. And we do not trust easily. And so this is not something you're going to get overnight. And so being consistent with each other and just, yeah, I think Greg, I can speak for you as well. Like we had to just tear down that wall and show our vulnerability. And from the supervisor and a leadership standpoint, which can be an officer on midnights all the way up, somebody's got to start the conversation first. And if I bare my soul and like how I'm struggling or whatever, somebody in the room is going to meet me even just a little bit. And I think the more and more we did that, the more and more we got. And so being intentional of saying, how's it going? I no longer say, fine, I'm going to give you a little bit because, again, I want a little bit more from you. We're still doing check-ins. I'm having check-ins with people who worked that scene and knew Kim, who are no longer officers anymore for unrelated reasons, but we still are checking in and being intentional because it is that important. And just the things that we've learned from dealing with her close friends and her family, every single situation or incident we've been a part of will forever be changed because we know how that feels now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Did you have something, Paula?
I am loving this conversation. The one thing that this group talked about 3 years ago and had a similar conversation is I recall you talking about sometimes when an external source comes in that you haven't established a rapport with, that can be challenging. So I would be interested in you talking a little bit about that, about how you find resources that your staff, your officers, everybody um, can trust.
Me?
Are you referring to like the police or the fire department that came in?
I think someone said something like, well, people came in who we didn't know, so we weren't sure how much we could be open with them. So that may have been what you were talking about.
Yeah, I don't exactly remember. I knew it was a Tallahassee Fire Department created something similar like this, and they came in and kind of, you know, they were very vulnerable about experiences that they had been in. And it took a couple of meetings, but over time, they kind of explained their experience in dealing with not only suicides from internal and their friends, but other things and how they kind of check in. And they've got a designated group, how they go and meet after every single incident. There was just a couple of things about, I think all of us had that why question. We were just so flooded with sadness and anger and all of the things and just why this? And I think they just put words to it that made sense. But again, I just, because we're such a hard, thick-headed, knucklehead sometimes, we just need that constant reassurance that like what you're going through is normal and we're going to be here no matter what, when you are ready.
Yeah. So when you're speaking to those check-ins and you guys have, so I've heard it multiple times where it's like you got to give like that, give a little, and that be genuine. Has there been a phrase that you guys have been using that's beyond like, how are you? Because we're fine. Is there something that you have developed that's maybe helped you during your check-ins that were like, man, this is working? That would be helpful to share.
Not necessarily a phrase. Like Heather said, I think we didn't have like a mantra that we went by outside of that hashtag, but it really boiled down to genuineness, and the response that we got was genuine. We had several different officers and dispatchers, and with everyone being different, we were in a place where we were flexible in that approach. So by nature we are, investigators. So we try to read body language. So you can say I'm okay, but if I see a lake in your eyes, that's going to tell me, okay, Greg, you need to lean in a little bit here. Maybe this is a good time to offer a hug. Maybe this is a good time to, hey, let's go to lunch. So it really depended on what was presented at the time of that initial conversation or that initial hello. So usually, hey, how are you? Hey, how's it going? And then you watch body language. You start twitching. That makes me move. If your response doesn't line up with what your body is saying, then we became nosier. Good question. A good response. We were nosier, especially Heather. Very nosy. Very intentional about getting in your business. But it was for a good. It was for a good cause. So no quote per se, but just observations and being intentional in responding or reacting to what we were presented.
Yeah, and some of the comments when they said the reciprocation of giving of yourself while asking others how's, and that's one thing that you said, Heather, that I liked, where you said, you know what, hey, if I'm gonna share this much, then I know that someone else is gonna feel like, okay, well then now I can too, and just creating that space. You guys are speaking a lot to creating something where it's genuine, building trust, and being more persistent and like curious and be like, tell me more, so not just being like, oh, well, just kind of brushing those things off. So is there anything as far as like when it comes to building trust and being genuine, like you kind of spoke to lunches, like what was something that kind of helped foster that, and that for you guys?
I think initially for me, it was like, I don't ever want to feel this way ever again. And then when I look around the room at the squad and my friends, I'm thinking, holy crap, I need to have more conversations, deeper conversations, and I think that next week dealing with her family and just the pure gutted, sadness. I think that initially was, and then just being a student of like, what is depression? What is suicide? Why? And just constantly learning, and then really leaning on the Sarahs and the Gregs and the other people like in our immediate group that were going out and talking with officers and friends. And then what can I do to prevent this from happening to me? I can't relate of wanting to do this or having this thought process in my brain, but was she the same way? How did this creep in? How did this happen? So just constantly like being a student of it. And then, I don't even know where we got it from. This pour one out, this cup. I feel like everyone's taking a cup and pouring water up all the way to the top. And then you pour a little more, and then you've got this, and I don't know the technical terms, but you've got this bubble sensation. And it's like the 17th pour when you least expect it, it's just going to overflow. We kind of use this visual to help us personally of like, oh, wow, I'm feeling like scattered or overwhelmed. What do I need to do? Well, I'm going to pick up the phone and call Greg and be like, I don't know what's going on. Do you have 5-10 minutes to kind of talk me not off the ledge? And maybe that's not appropriate for this conversation, no pun intended, but yeah, that's the driving force. Is I don't want to feel this way personally, and I don't want to have to talk with your family members. So what can I do now to help you through this and help myself through this too? So that was my driving force.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who were in our workshop earlier, we talked about one of the tools was to, if it's hard sometimes to be like, hey, I need help, or I do, like it's hard to do that, and especially like where do I start? And then so when you talked about like the 5 to 10 minutes, so sometimes it's just nice to say, hey, do you have 8 minutes? Do you have, and giving this just so it's like they can set this time aside. So then it's like, okay, then we need that human connection, which builds that trust, which builds that genuineness, and that relationship building. So I think it's important for those, asking, and fostering that type of thing where it's like people can ask for like, hey, let's set us up time versus like saying, some of those things that may be harder to say. Then once you're having that conversation, then you can. I like the detective part that you were saying, like, then you can pester them and be like, tell me more, like, what did you mean by that? Or different things like that. I have a question for you guys. During like I can see your guys' strength and your unity that you guys have built. Like the friendship is so strong, like you can feel it. So, have you guys had, but obviously, like um, with such a strong event, did you have some like aftershocks, if you will, or like um, what did that look like? More of the grief process before you came like to where you are now in that strong place that you had to endure or overcome, maybe with each other.
Like Greg and I relied on each other so much. Like I can remember the end of that week, we were so emotionally depleted. And then we got a sexual battery that walked in, and we needed to be 100%. Do you remember that? And we kind of all looked at each other like, who's going to lead? And it was like, just, we got this. Let's go. Professional hat on. This girl deserves our best. Let's do this. And like we kind of lean on each other then. Or the first time we got a phone call that one of Kim's friends was at the top of the garage where Kim was, and that was a couple weeks later. Greg called me. I'm on my way. I need you to come here. Okay. So we were safe within each other, helping these people. A month later, we got another suicide. It was like, I need you here, because we just knew how each other were going to support each other, encourage each other. We could pray together. We could be ourselves, be our vulnerable selves. And there was no judgment. There was perspective, there was encouragement. And so that's why we constantly know when crap hits the fan, that's what we're going to get from one another.
Yeah, you said something specific that struck with me. So, like when you have a major incident, I think that one thing when promote, this is knowing like, okay, we had this. Now this future that the future suicide or suicide attempt that we have, this is an at-risk call. That can create a lot of other like that can invoke those previous emotions. So just having a preset plan, what does this look like? Hey, when you have this next call, I need you to call me. Or things like what you guys built. So that is really strong. So I think that's something that the rest of us can take back to have these things pre-planned. It makes it easier than planning it in the moment. And I'm just going to speak to so for those in Idaho, we had the incident where we had those firefighters who were lured into the fire by the individual who started on purpose and then shot them. But I feel bad because I don't think that they didn't plan like what are we going to do next time we have that next grass fire. But then they had a grass fire in that same hill just a month later, but they just weren't ready for it. So I think like what you're speaking, I mean, I think that we got to talk about it so that people can anticipate how to help for these. Is there any other thing like that you're like, hey, we either didn't anticipate or we did, and it helped us, or what I mean, the advice that you can give?
Okay. I I think after Heather, she talked about the fire department and the different groups that came in after Kim's incident. Shortly after, and I know definitely within the past year or two, there's a group that we connected with, that we partnered with, called Second Alarm Project. And what Second Alarm Project is, it's a group that consists of fire department, really that's first responders, law enforcement, fire department, EMS, dispatch, and so they are from throughout the region. And what they do is when there is a critical incident, they respond at the request of the agency to go and talk to the affected employee. And the benefit for this group is they can relate to me more so, and it's nothing against Sarah, because Sarah is absolutely amazing. But they can relate when I talk about I jumped out of the car and I drew my gun and he fired this and he did that. They understand what that adrenaline feels like. They understand being in that place. And so it made it easier for the officers to respond and talk to people that could relate to where they were. And so our policy right now basically says if there is any incident that happens, especially like an OIS, an officer involved shooting, then they have to go through certain things. They have to go and talk to certain people, the counselors, things of that nature. But in addition to that, what we've included, and we used this after our shooting incident back in April, everyone that was involved in that incident, we opened the door and gave them the opportunity to sit down and talk to this group without the administrators in the room, where they could be free, where they could be transparent. And this group has several resources available that they present to that affected member. And so the day of the shooting, after everything died down, we were in a place where we went and we did check in. I'm touching. Hey, how are you? That day, we were numb. That day, we were in shock. The next day, how are you? And so when they got to the point, we knew that they were comfortable when they walked in the room and I said, how are you? And they had the meltdown and I pushed the door up and said, get it out. Mm-hmm. And then it was over and you go back to work. That's it. That's it. Cry it out. If you want to cry with me, let's cry together. And we cried together, get it out. And it was over. So the more that happened, the word started to spread. And so getting to the point where I can share that resource, there's a saying that I carry with me and I'll take it to my grave. People don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. So take all of your speeches, put it to the side. How are you? If you're not okay, it's okay. And so that's a stigma. And I believe Sarah can talk to, that's a stigma that we're fighting in mental illness anyway. There is a stigma with people saying, I'm not okay. And so just trying to fight that stigma. And so we're transparent. We are, like the comments say, we are trying to break that barrier because people are suffering in silence when the person sitting next to them has had a similar experience that could help me go get to that deliverance that I need. But we are afraid to open up and give you this side of me. And so that's why I love Heather. That side of me. Before I asked the question, she said, you hadn't eaten, sit down, we're going to Chick-fil-A, I'll be right back. So being there, being intentional, being consistent. And so if we can see it, the officers, they see it. Yeah, we've been working longer, but they recognize genuineness. And so it goes back to that. But yeah, second alarm. I'm not doing a commercial, but second alarm. This is what it looks like. If you want me to zoom in, I can show it to you, but they have an app and it's free to join. But that's something that we have incorporated with our department.
Are they statewide or nationwide?
Nationwide.
Are they nationwide?
To my understanding, yeah.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. I hadn't heard about it. So we dropped it, me first before Sarah. But we dropped it in the comments. No, I like because me and Sarah were racing. But yeah, this is they have. I'm looking at their website. It does look fantastic. I mean, they should at least buy you a soda, for that promo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I liked about them too is like the guys who showed up, I've worked scenes with them. So like you automatically like, okay, you're one of us. There was an immediate comfort in just exactly what Greg said. Like, I don't have to sugarcoat my feelings with this particular person because he or she's been there,
And in addition, and I'm gonna give it to you, Sarah, because I'm tired. In addition, when you go to that app, and I'm not promoting anymore, I'm just telling the truth of what this is. It gives an option where if you need peer support is available. But there's also an option with the group where you can do a self-assessment, and so you can, check yourself, review, what information is provided. And there's a lot of confidentiality there that where, resources available to you where you can use those resources until you get comfortable and get to the point where you can engage in the peer support. So there's different levels that's available. So going back to what we talked about earlier, the fact of, okay, the police department can't do it all, you can't fix it all, but there are resources available, and making those resources available to the affected officer. And that's one of the beneficial things to this particular company. And that's what they taught us in our dealings with them. I'm sorry, Sarah, too. Go for it, girl.
Well, I was just going to say, I think a big part of this conversation that's, I think, important to know, and as Greg, and I call him Lieutenant McSwain because I'm not an insider, right? As we pointed out, the peer-to-peer element is key. Like, that really is the most important thing. I feel like I'm in a fortunate position because I work very closely with FSUPD all the time. So I have an element of that closeness, but I still don't have it because I'm not a peer who can exactly relate to the situations that they are experiencing. And so one of the things that I wanted to point out from that I think was really important from this, when Kim passed, was multiple leadership members from FSUPD reached out to me as an advocate and somebody who understands what they do and is there and has an idea, right? To say, hey, Sarah, I really want to make sure we're providing as much support to our team. What resources do you know of? And that to me was like, I didn't end up being the resource. It ended up being a bigger conversation of how do we get you connected to Second Alarm? How do we get you connected to, I had colleagues who work at Tallahassee Police Department who have worked with officer debriefs before. Like, it was a matter of getting leadership staff within FSUPD connected to the right resources to provide that, to bring that in, that peer-to-peer support in. And it was just, and from there, like, I had very little to do with anything other than just being a periphery person who's there to provide support to my friends and colleagues, right? But I think if there's something to kind of walk away from, is recognizing that the peer-to-peer is key. And so if there's something every single person can do, is if this is something that you're passionate about, it's something that you're interested in, seek out resources to learn more about peer-to-peer support, because I can't emphasize it enough as an advocate, as a social worker, as a therapist. Like, that's really where I think trust is built. And having that in place ahead of time is really, really important, because I think that one thing that FSUP has always been great at is they have amazing leadership. They promote a culture of vulnerability and awareness, and trauma informed and all those things. And I think since Kim has passed, I think that what Greg was saying, we have even more things built in now, that now FSUPD is just ready to rock and roll anytime we have something, because we've been through this. And that speaks to leadership. It also speaks to individual people being willing to step up and be in that role, because it's just so important and can't be done otherwise.
Yeah, thank you. When you talk about that peer to peer, it's talking about that like connection where it's like, no, you really understand. So one of the elements that you guys face is that with Kim's family and friends, how like, because obviously there was this bond because you guys all shared that your connection was Kim. So that was how did you guys help support the family and friends that maybe if somebody else is in this situation that you're like, hey, we were proud that we did this and we encourage you to do it because it helped. What advice would you give?
Let me say, and then I'm gonna get off of this one because then you're gonna watch me. So when I got to the hospital, or when Miss Regina, the mom, when she made it to the hospital, I introduced myself and she said, "So you're Greg, you're McSwain, you're the one that Kim has been talking about." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she told me some of the things that she and Kim had talked about. So I had a benefit that others probably didn't have, because she had heard my name before she ever saw my face. And so that automatically opened the door and allowed us to have the moment that we have is because the relationship that Kim and I shared had already been relayed to her family. And so when they arrived, I had a one up on the others because they knew about Greg McSwain. So that was my way in.
Yeah, I think the way in was, I mean, we had just a handful of people show up every single day until they left because there was a reason why she did it with us on our campus with our particular squad to take care of her family. You know, that is just what I tell myself. And so that is what we did. We showed up every single day, and I, whether they knew me or not, I mean, they knew that we cared on a different level for them.
You talked about check-ins with former coworkers that have like that no longer work there, but that worked this incident. Do you guys have check-ins today that lasted outside of work that you still do that others can build as well on their side?
Yeah, I mean, those anniversary dates are really important. They creep in, and sometimes people struggle that whole month. Sometimes they struggle that day. And again, I go back to being a student of like depression and suicide and trauma, and being mindful of those time frames. I still see some of her best friends out, her ex-boyfriend out. And again, the officers who were there, and it's just like, hey, I know this is coming around. I just want to talk to you. Let's bring it up. Every single year, this is how I feel. And again, giving a little bit, it's been 2 years just to let you know, like we've got this podcast coming or well, whatever it is, you know. But again, being mindful of those anniversaries and conversations, being open, giving a little bit to see what you can get. And sometimes people want to chat and sometimes they just aren't in the mood or want to move on or whatever, but being respectful about it, obviously.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great takeaway. Checking in on anniversaries. So for me, I have one coworker who had lost his wife, and so but I have that anniversary date saved in my calendar because like you get so busy and like while it wasn't a big impact for me, I just want to make sure I'm there for that person. So I like that you brought that up. So my taking that piece of advice and then kind of blending it with throw in that in your calendar so you can do those intentional check-ins, and different stuff. So and as we kind of spoke to a little thing about how like where some people want to move on, some people aren't. I think that people will still be like hey, I appreciate checking in, always for sure. So don't feel like for those listening, we had earlier session where it was like like if we can remove some of those fears where we don't worry about like oh, people think I'm too, I'm too this, I'm too that if I'm reaching out for them. I think at the end of the day, like none of us want to go through the story. And so we'd rather be that than and checking on them and maybe be like, oh, sorry to be a bother versus having something else. But I don't think that most people would even be that. So I think it's again to speak to the power of your guys' unity. It is seen and different stuff. Gosh, our time is just flying. Do you guys have final comments, like things, anything that we didn't share? Maybe whether it was about Kim, like who she was, or about like just like final thoughts or things. And I know Emily, you had to go for a little bit, but maybe you want to speak to
Yeah, if I
some.
can just, I'm sure some of what I'm about to say was touched on, but I do want to shed a little bit of light on um, one thing that I always, and still to this day, will always swear on. It is not, it was never gone unnoticed and unappreciated the leadership that was had at FSU in the process of this, and the guidance that was given. The leadership and just the care for everybody that was there was. it was handled with white gloves, because we were all super fragile. We were all going through it. We were all just kind of in shock, and whether that was, the anger, the questions, the what just happened. So the support goes to it. It'll never be matched for me, and I pray I never have to endure something like this again. But the grief process is forever going. I find myself every now and then still a little angry, and then I find myself a little bit happy and giggly, because one thing about Kim is she didn't like things that flew. She didn't like birds, she didn't like butterflies, anything like that, to the point, like, for joking matters, they one year for her birthday, they put a bunch of butterflies in her birthday card, and she opened it up at work, and butterflies just went everywhere. And she was so mad. But like, now I see the color purple everywhere, and a butterfly, I see them everywhere. And so the grief process, it's not textbook. It goes up and down and around and round, and it'll last the whole rest of your life. As far as, noticing things, you're not going to, if it's not, like, kim Kim knew how to mask it very well. And that person that you might be dealing with, or yourself, you might be masking it, they might be masking it very well. And I don't do a great as enough job as I really want to, but in regards to, like, the anniversaries, or like when FSU had their incident not too long ago, I texted everybody, and I was, "Are you okay? Where are you? Are you all right? Where are you? Are you okay?" And I don't even want to respond. Just give me a thumbs up, so I know you just responded. That means you're okay enough, and we can talk about it later. But um, the peer support is just, it will go on for ages. And there are, I mean, I had to be forced to leave the hospital to go shower. I slept on the floor. I didn't want to leave, because that was it. Just the shock of it, it wasn't real. But I don't think that if you have the ability to build whatever you've got at home or with work and your peers, and noticing when, someone is just a little bit off, like Lieutenant McSwain said, if you can tell, that person that well, and like they're normally like, "Hey, what's up?" And, they just kind of give you like a little, "Hey, you know what? Nah, come here. What's wrong? Really tell me what's wrong." And again, like he said, just listening, they might be able to answer what they're doing, what they need themselves. But just being that person for somebody, it can it can change their whole life, really. So Kim was a great person, and I think we all learned a lot, not only about ourselves, but about FSU police, FSU as a whole, and our all of our relationships together too. So
Yeah, no, that I really like the part where you're talking about the stages of grief. I think that having like all of us have, like, in life we will have losses, and I think until you experience it, like, you're like, okay, I'm gonna go through these phases, not knowing that it's where it's continuous. It's not something that's like a complete and then it's done. Where it shifts and it changes and morphs, and it is different and complex. Having those check-ins in that peer support is important. I'm impressed with your guys' leadership skills. On like it, having so much stuff set in beforehand, I think was key. Which is why I really like that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So a lot of good takeaways. Any final things that you guys want to share from others?
I would like to say, and I'll try and keep it brief because I feel like preaching. I would like to say to anyone who's watching, anyone who's listening, regardless of what life presents, under all of the rubble, there is value in who you are. Your life matters. Um, Sometimes people aren't the greatest of expressing their appreciation. They aren't great at highlighting things that you have done or how you've made them feel. But in all of us, you matter. And if I can promote and promote and promote you matter, it gives us opportunity for hope, to reach that place of hope. And so, regardless of what people say about you, regardless of what people say about the situation, this is temporary. And there are resources available, but you have to trust and get to that point where you can reap the benefit of those resources. There are other options. Please hear me when I tell you there are other options. And so it's always my hope and my prayer that when people find themselves in this dark place, to understand that even though that dark cloud is there, on the other side of that cloud, there's still a sun that's shining. And we have to get to that sunlight. And so take this experience, take the heartbreak that we felt, the grief that we battle with, the questions that we wrestle with, and know that there is hope on the other side and you can get there. Trust me, we've been there. You can get there. We are living examples that you can get there. Thank you all for joining, for having me participate in this panel. Thank you all.
If I can piggyback off of what he said, you do matter. And I'm glad that you're here. Everybody, we're all glad you're here, whether you're hearing this and it's settling well, or if you're hearing this and taking notes and putting it in your toolbox to go into the workplace and be that peer. But not only that, you do matter. I'm so glad that you're here, and I love you. Say I love you. Say that you love somebody, and really listen. So I love you goes a long way too. So
I love you
Thank
too,
you guys so
Emily.
much for. I love y'all. Obviously the 64 people like on this panel, like you are here for a reason to keep on learning. As a friend, and you call me up, like I'm never gonna not be available for a hard or tricky conversation. To piggyback exactly what Emily and Greg said, you do matter, and sometimes it's hard for you to pull that out of yourself. So give your friend an opportunity to highlight that for you, because sometimes just getting it off your chest will help you kind of be able to tolerate the day. We all deal with stuff. And so I just challenge you to look inward. What do I need to do better? How can I communicate better? Because we cannot read minds. We can see sometimes little things and differences or whatever, but if you're good at masking, you're not doing yourself a good service. So I challenge everyone to look inward, and how can you be a better communicator today? How can you show up better for your friends and your family, and be all that you can be, and tap into that. I'm here for a reason. Let me do some good work, because I guarantee every single one here, you're doing good work. You know what I'm saying? You want to be better. That's why you're here to learn.
Oh no, that's really good. You guys have also good comments. I'm like, oh, you guys are really great. I love, Paula, what you added with that tribute. You can read it. Read it real quick. I think it's really good.
Oh, okay. Second. This is on Kim's the program at her celebration of life. When we are gone and people weep for us and grieve, let it be because we touched their lives with beauty and simplicity. Let it not be said that life was good to us, but rather we were good to life. That's by Jacob B. Rudin. And I think it really captures him well.
Yeah, that was really good. Oh, and thanks, Paula. Yeah. And to echo to kind of what everyone else, like, I hope everyone got like a takeaway from this. And if nothing else, you knew that like you mattered. And that we can help champion everyone else feeling that way in our workplaces, amongst our peers. I think that a lot of us have some homework. Like, we don't want to, like, it was like, we got to have some stuff in place before this happens, and different things, and just to help support it. And I really liked when Heather, where you were talking about like, I think it's easy for us to like, it's easy for people to be like, oh, I'm just gonna hide this. I gotta be strong. I gotta be this. But to self-reflect, I think there's important self-reflecting on like, are we masking and that isn't doing a service, especially when we like, reaching out to those safe places that we have for us. So you guys did a really good job. I'm not sure if Sarah's coming back. Other Sarah. Sarah 2, because she said that you were Sarah 1.
Oh, she's too
She said
kind.
no.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, so
I came back.
oh, yeah, you were coming back because I'm like it doesn't. Yeah. So, but I didn't know if you had any last thoughts that you wanted to add. With everything, it was really good.
No, you all said it. You all said it, and I'm very nearby. I've already connected with Second Alarm, so we're gonna do this again.
Not a
So
sponsor yet.
hopefully live and in person. But in the meantime, this will be available here on Crowdcast where you are. Also, we are going to be putting this up on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. So we'll email you all when that's done if you want to share it with someone that you think would like to hear this. So thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, guys. Lots of space. I appreciate it. And I appreciated your guys' vulnerability with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. We'll talk soon.